1. Well, it's time for another of our topical talks, and frankly, there is nothing more topical than climate change. And Greenpeace is a well-known name with a worldwide reputation and has been around for about 50 years. Our guest today is Gale Burns, who's a speaker for Greenpeace and a member of Sustaining All Life, which is a relatively new organisation that supports people who are active in this field. So, hello there, Gale.
Hello there, Mark. Hello, everybody.
Let's start with an easy question, shall we? And what made you join Greenpeace in the first place?
Well, I've been involved in different activities. For about 10 years ago, I was a local authority councillor, so I've had a lot of community links. But to be honest, it was really only when the United Nations report of 2018, you may remember, came out, and it said basically, we have 12 years with which to really get on top of the situation. That, to be frank, it kind of scared me. And I thought I'd better get my act together to some degree. And I'm still in the process of trying to get my act together on the subject. But that I like public speaking, and I thought it was, a useful way of contributing.
So what sort of things do you do as a speaker for them? Do you go to schools and colleges or the WI? Who is it? Where do you go for these things?
We'll speak to absolutely anybody, anywhere. So there has been in the past a big emphasis on schools, particularly primary schools and secondary schools. And now I think the shift, given that we have such a short amount of time, it's great that young people get the information, and young people are often leading on this issue, but we'll talk to anybody.
Okay.
Well, I'm delighted to talk to the CPRE, Mark.
I'm sure you are. I think that it would be fair to say that Greenpeace certainly was, very active in the 60s and 70s, in that sense of being a trailblazer. I mean, they really were ahead of the game, weren't they? And I would argue perhaps that a lot of other people have caught up with Greenpeace. But would it be fair to say they've gone off the radar a bit in the last sort of 20 years or so, the public radar?
I don't know. I think we come and go. If you look at the newspaper, you'll see lots of reports that we've done that really highlight some of the key issues. There are I'm very pleased there are other organizations that are also doing what, as you say, we pioneered about 50 years ago with the Rainbow Warrior ship. And it is almost exactly 50 years. I mean, there are other organizations doing direct action, and we're very pleased with that. We work in cooperation with them. It's really not a competition. We need everybody on this issue, absolutely everybody.
Now, we're going to try first here on our topical talks, because you've got some slides you'd like to introduce to the debate, Gale. So if you'd like to fire up the first one, let's see if we can make this work. Yes, and this is about temperature, isn't it? The first one,
correct.
I believe.
That's correct. And this was one of the things that really got me fired up, if you like. If you look at over not a short space of time, 300,000 years, you'll see that the temperature has really closely matched the CO2 concentration. And this is actually in the Antarctica, but it's true about around the whole of the world. But if you see the last bit of the slide, you'll see that the temperature has the CO2 concentration has really shot up because of industrialization. And our challenge now is how we handle that so that the temperature doesn't shoot up in a similar sort of way. We have about 12 years. Well, in 2018, we had 12 years. I mean, it's very hard to take on board this information. Already there are 200 species being lost every day, I think it is. So there are big things happening at the moment. But if we don't get on top of this issue, there'll be the ice shelves are shrinking at 13% a year. And there's lots of information out there that you can get. And I think the challenge that we have, and I have this challenge too, is that either we go kind of numb about it, or we get very, very scared and don't necessarily do useful activity. So that's what we have to take on board, I think, in the next few years.
And one of your messages is, again, the subject of our next slide, really, which is about personal choice, because I think you're right in what you're saying. Is it's very easy for people to go numb, as you put it, and just think, oh my God, this is terrible. What the hell are we going to do about it? But people can do something. And I would suggest that if everybody did something, that's realistic, change may happen.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I always think that the first thing that people can do, I mean, besides getting yourself a little bit knowledgeable about the issues, there's no shortage of information out there, but just, you know, with an open mind, take a look at what people, particularly the scientists, are saying. And by all means, look at the whole range of debate. But the other thing I always think is really important is have conversations with people around you. You know, how many conversations in the last week did you manage on this subject? And if you can, the key bit, I think, is to listen to other people. Now, we've set up something, and we'll try it actually with the CPRE in a few weeks' time, and do contact me if you're interested. We'll set up what's called a listening group, which is really basically where people get a chance to be listened to. That's the difficulty with this, is that most of us are numb and don't talk about the subject, and we don't get to explore what's underneath that unless we actually talk about it and get listened to some degree.
Are you able to show us that slide, or is that?
Indeed. Yeah, and I should say, Mark, that I think is one of the first things you can do. But beyond that, I mean, obviously there are small personal issues, sorry, there are personal measures you can take, which are very important. I think you've seen the slide before, but to many people's surprise, the biggest thing you can do, did you notice what it was?
Yes, only have one child.
Exactly. That's really quite a big, huge thing you can do. I'll show the slide now, just so that you can see the range of things. Let's see if it'll go to where it should do.
That's the one we've seen.
I'm afraid it won't.
No?
No, I'm
well,
sorry.
not to worry. Not to worry. I mean, we can talk through it. I mean, it ranges from, you know, make sure you wash your washing on a cold or a low temperature wash, dry your clothes outside, not on the in the tumble dryer.
Yeah.
Go car free.
Yeah.
And as you say, controversially, the most significant one is only to have one child, which is in itself quite a controversial policy, isn't it? Because I think in China and Italy and places like this, it's proving to be not necessarily the most successful thing. You know,
Yes,
in the terms of the generation gap, is what I meant.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, have one fewer child, I think is
okay.
the measure. You know, we're not necessarily telling people how many children they should have. But you're right. The top three things you can do are, the first is live car free. The second would be to avoid one transatlantic flight, and the third is to buy green energy. And then all of the other things, I mean, they're important. So ideally, eat a plant-based diet is great. Ideally, beef is the most intensive area that it would be good to give up. But I think the main point I want to make, Mark, is that while those things are really important, they're not going to do the job on their own. That actually something else is going to need to be a real radical shift. And that radical shift, I don't think will happen unless we show that we care to the politicians around the world that this has to happen. Now, the government, the Conservative government, is making some useful noises at the moment, but at the same time, they're taking measures which really make us a little bit worried about really whether they're taking this seriously enough. And they will, we know from the past, that they will only do it if we take action. We don't have long to take action. And I think it's too much to tackle this on your own. I think you do need to be part of a group doing this. I don't really mind if it's Greenpeace. Would love to have you in Greenpeace. But, if you set up a CPRE group that's looking at this, that would be great. A street group, I think we'll need things that are really local, because it's going to change so quickly. You mentioned that I was a poet. And I'm still a poet. I used to say to other poets, we'll all be environmental poets soon, and they would scoff at me. And now they're all writing environmental poetry. So it was one thing I was right about.
But it is something, it is a subject. I mean, here in Gloucestershire, we have the home of Extinction Rebellion in Stroud. Stroud and Gloucestershire generally is seen as at the forefront of this particular issue. So there are things people can do locally, aren't there? It's not just a question of signing up for Greenpeace and funding whatever. There's a local action set, isn't there?
Absolutely, absolutely. And as I say, I think we'll need street groups. We'll need town groups, village groups. There are some very interesting transition towns. I think Stroud is a transition town, and we've got one local to here in London where I am, which are really looking at how the economy is going to have to change in the light of climate crisis.
So the message is, don't sit back, do something about it. And, hopefully CPRE and Greenpeace can get together with this talking group. That sounds like a really positive thing to do, doesn't it?
That would be great. Do something with other people. I think it's really too hard. It's really too much to take on board, the size of the challenge we face. Do something with other people, okay. I think is the key message. And I think, Extinction Rebellion have done great on that, but a whole ranges of groups are doing great. And I think I don't want to blow our trumpet too much, but we did set the tone on this 50 years ago, and I think we've managed to keep it going.
Gale, sadly the clock is beating us, but if anybody would like to get in touch with you personally, are you happy to engage?
Absolutely, absolutely. And as I say, we will have a listening circle in 2 or 3 weeks' time. If you're interested in joining that, it's just a chance for you to be listened to. Then contact the office and we'll fix up a time to do that. But no, indeed, do contact me or the Stroud Greenpeace Centre.
And if anybody would like to see Gale in action, have a look at his own website and you can see him doing some of his poetry readings. Gale, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. We very much appreciate your time.
Many thanks, Mark. Many thanks, CPRE.